Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's New Cyber Frontier. Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On today, have David Scott joining me, he's a new member of our team at BlockFrame, so kind of his introductory, but we're going to talk about some things around his experience in the industry, where we've come from, and just introduce him to the show today. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It's great to be a part of the team. Chief Marketing Officer, wow. I got that big responsibility, right? To get the word out and let everyone know about the great things we're doing. So how you been?
Been doing good. Yeah, it's been a day today, huh? We've been recording all day, other things for releases and whatnot, but definitely it feels good to kind of be wrapping up the day. You see we're both in suits here and all spiffed up, and we had several people in and out of the studio today doing various different recordings. So it's been an exciting time, but
definitely.
One of the things we wanted to get on and talk about, and we thought it'd be a good topic, depending on recent news and everything. And I've been doing a little traveling around the world. I know you've been different places, but recently it's some supply chain type of vulnerabilities and some physical supply chain attacks in Lebanon.
Unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable. First, beautiful country.
You've been there?
I've just seen pictures.
I've been to Israel. I've been to a couple places. Was in the Navy.
The food. I'm in DC, so that's
Gotcha. Yeah.
Amazing restaurants there. Lebanese food. Some of my neighbors are Lebanese, and I've seen just pictures, and so I've always wanted to go. I know it's on the Mediterranean, and so it just kind of hit home for me when I saw.
Yeah, when people, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
There's the question, and I know it can go either way on this about the ethical. I don't think we want to touch on that, whether who's to blame, who's right, who's wrong, whatever the politics
are. As if I know
are.
who.
How am I going to know either?
But interesting. There is no real way to attribute using some of the technology that's available today. I mean, how will we know for sure? It's just conjecture in a sense, or whoever takes responsibility, but. You never know. And you may not know the entity, right? Or the agency or whomever, but you definitely don't know the person, right? Mm. It's kind of, Yeah, I know, having been in the military involved with some operations like that, even me feeling like we're all empowered, we're in the U.S. military, the U.S. is right all over the world. It was difficult for me being involved with actions when I knew kinetic operations were being involved, just how I felt personally about the ethics of that. Yeah. And the same thing comes up when I hear about this. It's like, no matter which side you think is doing the right thing, the wrong thing, the ethics of the human factor of 3,000 people holding something in their hand. Right. Yeah, it makes everyone doubt and kind of lose a little bit of trust or have a little bit of suspicion in the physical devices we have.
Anything. I mean, we're carrying how many of these things on our person?
Absolutely.
Where did they come from? Did they come from the same place? I mean, why not have that pager? The walkie-talkies was a bigger thing. We might have some just like that rolling around in our police force.
How many things do you have in your house that are wirelessly enabled? And we would never think,
Right here. I mean, just around us.
Exactly.
We have 3 on my person. We got them pointing at us. Yeah. The computers here.
Fridge, your toaster, it could, alarm clock by your bed, your cell phone, a million things. And so, it hit our televisions, it kind of hits our...
I think it hit everybody too at the same time. It's like something happened. The world changed that day.
Yeah. It's an interesting attack. It was a new spin on attacks that have happened, especially if you're targeted. I mean, it's not going to happen in the URI, but it was a very interesting spin on what the potential is.
I think there's certain key events that happen that you can put a finger on once you're in the future looking back, and I think this will be one of them.
Definitely.
But let's take a break here from our sponsor. We'll be right back in a minute.
Okay.
BlockFrame technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting BlockFrame at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier on today with David Scott, and we are kind of talking about supply chain and security of supply chain. Yeah. For the break, we talked about how that sometimes there's moments, times, events, individual instances you can point to when something just turned, and from there on out, it's a different world. And in the security world, we have a couple of those. Look back to one that's more recent, probably Stuxnet. Critical infrastructure was attacked, and then we go, to some of the nuclear plants that were infiltrated, and then we go back some blackouts on the East Coast that might or might not have been attributed
Exactly.
just in the critical infrastructure. And every industry has those, and security definitely has those points throughout history. And I think this is a big one. I think this is the point when everybody has to think from this point on, okay, it was a theoretical before,
right,
but now it's not.
Right. I think also when you were mentioning those attacks, some of them were cyber related, but there are some interesting other attacks that, with like Huawei, right, where you have backdoor attacks, and those are just supply chain attacks, hypothetically speaking, right? It was in the news that some people believed it, not saying and not confirming that that's true. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are some products that within the supply chain and how they are manufactured, there's a backdoor. Sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes, as a way to service componentry, and sometimes it's not intentional.
And I've been, we'll say that there's products that I've worked on that the companies knew there was a major backdoor and a problem that was even exploited that never became public. And they ended up being able to fix and resolve the problem without it being made aware of. That were definite supply chain things, supply chain attacks.
But all those
notably, I'll give you an exact example. There was a certain year in the past, there was a percentage of computers in the market that had a rootkit in. It was basically a BIOS update that could be done over the internet. That was an open, progressive process thing that was used to infiltrate by manufacturers in their supply chain in another part of the world. As soon as that computer booted up, every computer that had that BIOS got pushed an update from a foreign government.
Yeah.
And that just got fixed, patched. They took care of the problem. It no longer exists. It's in the history, and you'll never find that public.
Right.
And it does happen, and it has happened. This one went the kinetics in people's hand. It's just a little bit different.
No, it's huge. It was a big difference, and my sentiments go out to the families that were lost and all the devastation.
Yeah.
I think
we forget about that part sometimes, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I think about it, like I said, with my example being in the military, I kind of I get a little bit teared up, even emotional about it. That second of, when you think about it, so you stop thinking about it.
Right.
But you got to acknowledge that human part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because in the past, I think a lot of the things that we're familiar with were either about secrets or they were about money. Someone was trying to have some kind of a financial gain or have a leg up. And with this right here, it was different. And I think the reason why it hit home for a lot of us is lives were lost. There was actual physical harm that was done. It added that new spin, that new dimension that at least I hadn't been exposed to. I mean, perhaps with Stuxnet would be an example of something that could have definitely caused physical harm in some other areas. But aside from that, this was pulled off. It was successful, and it was done in a very targeted manner. You know, it was targeted. It was well, yeah.
Which, you know, I've heard people say, well, that makes it better. At least it wasn't indiscriminate. I have a little hard time with that statement as well. I think to just acknowledge that, yeah, there's lives lost, and that is something that we want to look deeper at what caused it, but not unacknowledge or not reduce the impact of what actually happened.
Yeah. So I don't want to be, typical male, not to be stereotypical and all that, but this light bulb went off in my head, when I heard about it, and I was like, how would I have avoided this? And I also want to know, like, who did this, and was it like, how did they pull it off? Like, was it explosive? Was it, some other way that they've done it? And like, what could have been done just from a cybersecurity person and from a security person? How could this been avoided? And still wrap my head around that.
I wondered that how many people are asking, could this have happened to my products? I'm a product manager. Or are we, are people at that level? I'd love to know what your thoughts are if you want to come on the show and talk about it. At that level where you're like, oh, that's just them. Our product is just for
would never happen
kids in school. That'll never happen. We don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Or is everybody now adding this to their risk table?
Right.
I'd like to know where you sit with that.
Yeah.
Reach out, post below the show if you think one way or another, like, okay, that's something, it makes it more real, but we're not really addressing it. Or, absolutely, we had to add this to our risk table, and now we have paths we have to address and mitigate that in some way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a distribution issue, perhaps. Supply chain. It was targeted. How many other forms of distribution are there? Do we know who's working in these places and how they're tampering or handling goods?
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's not just a matter of like opening a box and putting in something that, let's just pretend this was an explosive that was put in there. But it could be a way that the electronics were tampered with, or the communications channel, or even the software, or how all those three things together created some physical, reaction, right?
Yeah. I've worked for years with, and I'll prelude this by saying, if you're a store and you sell products, shirts, whatever, clothes, you build in a theft. 10% is going to be loss, theft, employee, internal, whatever. You build that into the business model. So companies with products have been building into the business model for years.
Yeah.
What sometimes is called counterfeits, warranty losses, internal revenue losses that we're just going to raise our price a little bit to account for a certain percentage of these as the nature of doing business. But there's been some level of just accepting of that as a business risk, because those clones, often called, might just have 10% less chips in them. They kind of do the same thing, but they have our company's name on it and they make us look bad.
Yeah.
And because we use all open source, because we publish our bill of materials, somebody can do that, have no overhead cost, reduce the count of products that go into it, put a smaller microprocessor in a phone that looks like ours with our name on it, and it goes out in the market. They have no overhead and they're making the same price that we are.
Right.
So that loss has been low enough to be acceptable. And it's been included in the business aspects, the monetary, the financial. But the human life loss is a different story.
Right.
So now we're adding separate line items. We're identifying, is it potential to have a human life lost with our product if infiltration would be this?
Absolutely.
Because we're not the ones that want to have that name, our logo, on 3,000 things that blow up in somebody's hand.
Definitely. you've probably never been a victim of data loss ever in your life. I'm saying that jokingly. But for sure, I have. And, in the industry that I've worked in, we've done similar work. Okay. I have concerns sometimes. Just, this is serious. You and I, I've never spoke to you about this, but I have concerns when my data is lost. And if there are individuals that know what people have worked on in the past, and they're able to find that data easily on the dark web or wherever they may find it, right? And able to correlate an address with that, and then able to predict a innocent product that's used, right? And tamper with it. And I have concerns for folks that all over the world that where just information is being lost right now, where we may not have control over the information or know where it is, or be able to pull it back, be able to let that information expire if it's lost. It's just when information is lost, when our data is lost, it is gone. It's in the wrong hands. It's in the hands of the pirates or the bad guys or whoever wants to siphon it. We don't have control. But imagine if when our data is lost, there was a day when we did have control. Like if it somehow it expired, or there's something we could do.
And that's a lot of when we look at our philosophy, our approach to put products together with BlockFrame, which you're part of now, is to the thought process isn't okay. What if it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And the only way to say a future is different is to kind of turn the game around and say, well, we're going to make a way that whoever was the one responsible for compromising, the one responsible for misusing, the one responsible for misinformation is identifiable.
Yeah.
It's not going to change again immediately, but right now, nobody's responsible.
Yeah.
So if nobody's responsible, nobody cares.
It's easy to commit the act if you know you're not going to get caught.
Yeah, and that's like when I used to teach at the university, I used to go through this exercise, be like, okay, what is the laws for violation of cyber crimes, for this, for that, and I get all the students hyped up about it, and then I'd be like, okay, find how many people have been prosecuted and punished for them.
Wow, how many did they find?
It was like 4.
Yeah,
worldwide.
Wow, right.
And it's like, okay, it's considered a victimless crime. How does it go? And so if there is no accountability, there's no victims or criminals, because we can't tell the difference.
So does
Take a break though, we hold that thought, we'll be right back after we hear from our sponsors.
Sounds good.
BlockFrame technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting BlockFrame at www.blockframetech.com.
So welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today with David Scott, talking about before we left, is it a victimless crime if there's no way to tell the difference between the victim and the criminal?
It's a crime is a crime, But I think what I'm curious is, will this happen again? Is this the last time it's going to happen?
So we're talking to the pager, going back to the
supply chain
more
attack.
Physical supply chain attacks.
Does it stop here?
And you're right. As soon as it is kinetic, as soon as it's not victimless anymore.
Yeah,
now, is the company that put those out responsible?
Yeah.
Is there a lawsuit from all those families against the company with their logo on there?
Right. How do we move forward? Who do we hold responsible for it? How? What control should have been in place? What attribution can we provide? Where did it even occur within the supply chain? Did it happen in the company? Did it happen while they're being mailed? Was it the mail person that did it? Was it, what component did it? It's so
who
hard.
were any of those people?
Right.
We can't tell the difference. We can't. It's all throwing products over the fence. And that, a lot of times, I mean, this is what we started back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We had a big push for outsourcing in the United States.
Yeah.
And it was open up the rest of the world, free trade. We can get cheap labor in other countries of the world. So we outsourced our manufacturing in a big way. And now the whole CHIPS Act, the last couple of years, is kind of recognizing that, well, maybe that decision kind of by everybody, the whole commercial world chasing inexpensive labor, wasn't the right decision security-wise.
Yeah.
So now we have a refocusing, the CHIPS Act, bring things back to the United States.
Right.
Be able to tell where it was manufactured, be able to identify the components in it. At the same time, we have military aircraft, military large products being made, mission critical. And there's 100,000 different manufacturers that make something in there. Right. And there's no real list of who put something into that.
Yeah.
And all encompassing. You might pick up and not even knowing what software libraries are in it, in half of them. So keeping the supply chain means combining physical and virtual, because they're kind of one and the same. Because how many things in a modern military aircraft have a computer in it that runs an operating system, that runs libraries, that runs open source, runs proprietary.
Yeah.
Keeping track of that is something that we're just on the cusp of. Oh, we have to start thinking about this. And oh, by the way, now these kinetic attacks, it has to go on our risk matrix.
Absolutely. The interesting thing too is with the pagers, I would think after this incident occurred, it's easy just for the folks that it didn't happen to, just to throw them in the garbage. It's an inexpensive solution. You mentioned airplanes though, and the thing that was going through my mind was, if a plane is compromised, do you trash the whole thing? And if you don't,
which parts are compromised?
Thank you.
How do you do an analysis? Send somebody in there with a set of jumper probes
on the breadboard.
On the breadboard. What do you do?
Right.
Do you tear it apart? Do you go try to find out who put stuff in it?
Yeah.
Which plane? Which one?
How do you do sourcing?
This plane, they were half of them were final assembled in one place, the other half final assembled in another place, and now, oh, by the way, there's 10 of those places. Now, oh, by the way, every subcomponent has 15 different places it got stuff from. And there's 10,000 subcomponents. That's the complexity we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it takes a new thought process.
Right.
And we have to start controlling our supply chain. And, i.e. secure supply chain, which has been almost like a cliche word that everybody says they're going to do.
Yeah.
But the direction and how to do it are even somewhat foggy.
Yeah. It makes me even think of a spin on the denial of service attack, where we deny ourselves. With that fear of the supply chain being compromised, we deny ourselves service to a component that's necessary. It could be energy infrastructure. It could be a medical device that's saving our troops or our people. It could be an airplane. But if we think it's compromised, we might pull them out of production. We pull it out temporarily, and we deny ourselves service.
That was some of the scenarios in you probably saw this in the grid protection, was if a device is compromised, how would we isolate? And that was part of the compliance, is knowing what was out there, what it was. So how would we isolate, remove, and address it?
Yeah.
And that in itself, billions of dollars later spent on just trying to inventory what's out there.
Yeah. So I think, what if we were able to have a fingerprint, or some kind of credible representation of how the hardware components that we're integrating on these large complex systems, or even medium or small systems. But if we had a fingerprint of that we could trust.
Yeah. And that's kind of the future, is one vendor at a time is going to have to say, okay, I make this product. I have 15 competitors.
Yeah.
Mine's going to show what's in it and verify my supply chain as a quality to show that my quality is better than the other options you have to buy.
Right.
And that's how secure supply chain comes into place. It's going to be one vendor at a time. and whoever implements it first puts their competitors out of business.
Yep.
Because if it's on the market and you can prove it, and you have 5 competitors that can't, that's the selling point. Nobody's going to buy those 5 competitors until they go spend 13 months to have a new design cycle to get the product out.
The thing is, it's like, how long is it going to take for hardware manufacturers to catch up with what we're already doing in information security? I mean, we already are doing hashing. We're already doing digital signatures there. That allows us to trust the sender, right? It allows us to kind of take a fingerprint in a sense, right? And trust it or encrypt the fingerprint.
So,
why don't we do that with hardware?
We do, and having worked in hardware industry for years, the problem isn't that a vendor can do that. It's that each vendor does it so differently that if I'm buying products from 3 vendors, there's no way that they're going to work together in my use case.
Interoperability. Yeah.
And I'm going to have to decide which vendor I buy all of theirs and exclude all the other vendors in order to get some semblance of a framework of security, which is what the vendors have been working on in years. Make security that only works for our products and try and force our competitors out of the market that way by being a one choice shop for our customers. So they only have one product to choose from because our products don't work with anybody else's.
So the customers
buy our whole family of products and they all work together.
Right.
So now if you're a hospital chain, you're Concentra Hospital, only buy GE hospital stuff and throw out all your other stuff.
Right.
It's not feasible. It's not going to happen. But because of that approach where they're not getting together to say, let's work together to make something, because none of those individual companies that might have, 30 to 50% of the market share have a vested interest in working together to make a combined security, because it's not going to raise their market share one iota.
Right.
But the hospital is the one that benefits from it.
Right.
And them requiring it isn't something that is their expertise. So these type of a framework to do so is, literally, and that's what, our focus is at BlockFrame, where we put together and spend years not just working with, something that is all internal, but saying, how does every piece in the industry fit together? Part of the reason why we've been talking to so many people and doing it so publicly for so many years is to get everybody to come in and give us a piece of what that joint security looks like.
Yeah.
So that the solution can encompass every known voice, every known capability, so that it does work together in a framework.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that characterization, that collaboration, I think is going to it obviously is going to enable security and transparency, but I think the innovation that's going to allow.
And that's the thing, with the rapid innovation that can make sense for us as a company, as well as all the customers, but in a way that everybody's benefiting.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and this is where really the combination of blockchain and cybersecurity are thought of as 2 different things. But we know cryptocurrencies implemented blockchain for distribution of trust.
Yeah.
And cybersecurity we can secure a system, we can secure a database, companies can secure their product chain, but how do they know that they trust another company's security?
Yeah.
Or data is trusted from this database to this database. And it's the trust between different configurations of security that's missing.
Yeah.
And trust is what blockchain does well.
Yeah.
So the unique approach to put those 2 together will be, they won't think of them as 2 things in the future. They will be one and the same thing. And you won't know how security ever happened without distributed ledger or blockchain, because it's just the piece of it that solves the bigger problem.
Right.
And that's the thing. And at the same time, not only solving the bigger problem, but democratizing the solution so that each company makes their own business and has a vested interest in working together instead of working separately. Because the blockchain consensus only works when unrelated, unvested interest parties all agree with the consensus method and come together with a solution. And that technological combination is, it's the infrastructure, it's the backbone. Like TCP is the backbone of communication. That is the backbone of the future of security, or not just networks, not just systems, not just databases, not just people and authentication or products, but all of them connected together.
Yeah. It's great. Or it just won't work. I think, right now, in order to have any of that discovery, you have to run a test as opposed to just something not working.
Yeah. And we're kind of running to the end of our time. One example I will leave, and many people might have found an earlier show of mine talking about the company I say was always the first cybersecurity economics company.
Okay.
And we know it as Apple Computer, one of the biggest companies in the world right now, developed from the ground up their ecosystem for all their products, using a similar distribution of trust. We trust all the systems, all the vendors are trusted, all our software is required to come from our vendors, all our files have to have our extension and be approved for our systems, all our downloads, all our users have to be approved. Everything's connected.
Yeah.
And that's the type of ecosystem of trust. But as you see right now, the EU is trying to get Apple to open up and let other vendors come in. It doesn't scale well across industry without the bigger distributed trust tool. And that's where, using blockchain as that overarching feature for security or trust between different security components. It's really dry throat here is really where, you won't know the two as being separate things in the future. Security and trust of distributed ledger.
Yeah, it's good. I think
you want to wrap it up for me here?
Sure. So, I think what's interesting and what we've been observing now is, we've had these unfortunate incidents that have happened, terrible, but it's really given us a lens into the future. This is what security is like. A decade or two ago, there were certain attacks that, have proliferated, and when combined with other ones, you're seeing more sophisticated attacks. Chris had mentioned Stuxnet. Those are a combination of a million other attacks that are brought together and combined to do something larger. So it's really timely and interesting. Looking forward to the comments in the chat about the this physical attack, about how to fingerprint hardware, and
what your risk is looking like. Are you changing your risk profile in your company to start considering this? Let us know what your thoughts are.
Thanks. It's a great conversation, Chris.
Yeah.
Great to see
you.
All
right. Well, thanks again for joining us in New Cyber Frontier. Sorry about my last throat got really dry, and I tried to power through it, and sometimes, boom, I just had a long day of talking already.
It's great.
But thanks.
It's great.
Thanks for joining today. Have a good one.
All right. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We